Alright, so one thing you guys might be interested in is how to look at your plans. In the old days they were called blueprints because they were on Mylar and they looked blue. Today they're just plans, they're just printed paper, so that's what we call them now, plans. But one thing I wanted to show you is how to specifically look at your foundation plan, which if you can get the gist of that, you can pretty much go through and look at, all of your different sections, your framing, your anything that has details. So here, let me show you. So this is the foundation plan for this house. I'm going to cover up the address and the owner. But so you look at it, you get oriented. It's easier if you set it up, orient yourself in the same direction as the house you're working on or the project you're working on. And then each area will give you specific details. Like here, we look at this footing. The engineer is calling out the detail 11 on sheet S5. So that's typically how plans are written, drawn. They'll have the detail number and they'll have the page number. And where you see this line going through, that's indicating that that's specifically for that area. And then sometimes they'll give you a detail that's typical for a certain type of footing or pad footing or area condition. So you can look for that too. Like, so here we want to see, okay, so what's he telling us to do at this wall here? So detail 11, sheet S5, find our page. There's our detail sheet, page S5. Okay, we find number 11. Number 11 will give us our depth, tells us what kind of rebar we need to use. It's showing us the condition here. We're tying into an existing footing. He's telling us what kind of epoxy to use, what kind of dowels, rebar dowels to use. And there's also notes. You have to look for any notes that they have on the details. So he's telling us that there could be an opening, a door track here that needs to be recessed. We have stem walls we're building. Luckily this engineer is a pretty easy engineer to follow. Some of these guys are very adamant to overkill and double up on everything. This engineer's not. So he's pretty easy to follow. Nothing's too complicated. But that's the basic way to read your details regarding your foundation construction. So you go through your foundation plan, you go through and you look at all the different notes and symbols and everything that he's telling you. Like this symbol, he's telling us that there's a drop. So there's a 2-foot drop from here down to here. Here he's telling us that there's new construction tying into existing construction. Here he's telling us we have new slab that needs constructed. And then you have your notes, usually down at the bottom of your plan. And something else you need to pay attention to is typically at the very beginning of your S sheets, your structural sheets, there'll be general notes. And in those notes, it'll tell you what PSI concrete you need to use. There could be an inspection schedule for special inspections. Again, luckily here, we don't have to have any special inspection for our epoxy dowels. Typically you do. Foundation plan will show you your shear schedule. So all of these walls with this triangle and the number is your shear schedule. And you can go onto your framing sheet, and on your framing sheet, usually over your shear schedule, and that will tell you how many anchor bolts you need. The anchor bolt spacing will be specified in there, size of anchor bolt. It'll tell you if it's a 2x plate, so like a 2x6 plate, or a 3x plate, 3x6, etc., etc. On bigger jobs like the one we just finished, where you have different wall types, there'll be wall schedules, there'll be footing schedules, where they'll give you a number to denote what type, what size of footing. Also, like on the regarding the shear, there'll be a schedule telling you what size plate to use. All of this stuff you have to pay attention to, because A, that's how the engineers designed your foundation. B, that's what your inspector is going to be looking at. You know, he's going to be taking this plan, looking at all the same details and notes and schedules, and then comparing that to what you have constructed in the field. So later on, I'll go through and show you how to look at some of the architectural sheets, because that can be a little more tricky. You know, trying to look at your plans and understanding your elevations. You know, looking at your... It's easy to look at the plans on a plan view, so looking down. A little more tricky when you're trying to look at it on a horizontal and vertical aspect. But once you do it for a little while, you'll get used to it. But you gotta, you know, it's a good idea to go through and highlight all the different things that you have going on. That way you don't miss anything. You know, like here, he's telling us that there needs to be a recess here in the slab. That's something that's easy to miss. And typically that's not something that an inspector or anybody is going to be looking at and calling you out on, saying, hey, where's that, you know, how come that's not formed or blocked out? And you definitely don't want to have to come back and cut it and jackhammer it out. So all those things are stuff you have to pay attention to. And every engineer and architect is a little bit different. You know, they have their own style of drawing. But it's not too hard. You get used to it. Alright, that's it for this one. Later.